and it is recording. So John, whenever you're comfortable, you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Roberta. I appreciate it. Gang, thanks very much for joining the session today. I appreciate it. We're going to talk a little bit today about why game-based learning is really poised to thrive, and as we see a post-pandemic surge of distance learning. Before I sort of get started on things, I tell you a little bit about my background. Back in 1997, 98, I was a young guy and a corporate trainer, and my job was to train middle and upper management to use SAP, which is an enterprise resource planning software. And I did that at Fortune 500 companies. And at the time, a lot of senior managers actually didn't even have computers. They had assistants who used them for them. And so you can imagine when they had to go to instructor-led training where they had to learn about a software and they didn't even use computers, they weren't happy at all. It was a dreadful job, and those instructor-led sessions were painful. One day, I don't know why I thought of it, but I just decided I had two sort of module machines set up to teach people the software, and I just divided people into two teams and said, enter this bit of inventory into the system, and the first team that can get it done and complete the system task, as it was called, wins. And people actually had a bit of fun with that. And after, one person who had been a particularly disgruntled student prior came up and said that she had actually had a really good time in that one session. And I thought that was an interesting observation about how I'm just adding an element of competition. And, you know, that didn't prompt me to start Lemonade LXP, but it was my first experience with turning learning into a game where I saw a little bit of success. But while I was at that same job, one day I was actually on a sports website looking at hockey scores, because I'm a Canadian guy, so that's what I do. And there was a banner for ESSO. So I clicked on the banner and it took me to ESSO's boring corporate website. And it turned out that a couple of days later, I was reading an article and it said that banner ad click-through rates were sinking. And I thought, no kidding, who would ever want to leave their entertaining content to go and see a boring corporate brochure? And I started thinking about how that model would roll out. I thought about it, how it would work on TV. Like you're watching a TV show on channel 6 and there's an ad that says, turn to channel 50 to watch our 24-hour infomercial. Nobody would ever change the channel. So that thinking about that model, television model, which is really, we all view television companies as broadcasters, but they're really manufacturers, and we're their currency, their raw materials. You use 22 minutes of content to manufacture an audience, and then you take 8 minutes of advertising, put it into the 22 minutes of content, and you manufacture a business. So I started thinking about that model, and I thought, I wonder if we could bring that model to the internet. So then I started thinking, well, what would be the content that I would use to manufacture the audience? And so I started doing research into what people were doing online. And back in 1999, the number one thing people were doing online was surfing pornography. I didn't want to get into that business because my mother would have been terrified, mortified. But number two, they were playing games. And so I started a company which is called Launchfire. And what it did, and still does, is it turns digital marketing into games. And so in the beginning, we built flash games into which we nested video ads. And it was really kind of more gamification than it was game-based advertising. And that model was fine for a couple of years, but the reality is people don't like their entertainment interrupted by things. And while the game was sufficient to drive an audience, the video ad was kind of a nuisance. And eventually we morphed that business into a business that builds kind of microsites and contests, but shapes the whole experience into a game. And through doing that, we were able to create a quite a good set of products that drives really great results. But one of the main things that they're used for is educating consumers about our clients' brands. So it was that educate piece that got us into the training space. Back in 2005, we'd built a game-based digital promotion for the Tylenol brand, and the sales manager played the game and said, "This is an amazing educational tool. Could we morph it into an e-learning program for our sales staff?" And we said, "Yeah, I guess you could." So we reconfigured the game and the technology and rolled it out as an e-learning program. And it was sufficiently successful. In fact, it was the top training program Tylenol had ever run for their sales team. And so, and I think it may have been the first game-based e-learning program. Anyway, it was sufficiently novel that we got written up in a couple magazines. Over the next few years, we did everything we could to ignore that business, but despite our utter neglect and worst marketing efforts, we got a smattering of clients. And it got to the point where it was becoming hard to service them and run our other business. So about a little over 4 years ago, we staffed up and we built a learning experience platform, a game-based learning experience platform that allows you to author your own learning games, and really transforms the learning experience into a game. And we've seen great results with that particular software and the methodology that we use. And we have seen a tremendous amount of interest since the beginning of the pandemic, coming from all over the place, from learning institutions to large corporations to associations and so forth. All of these companies looking, or organizations looking for ways to engage and train a remote workforce. And this is a challenge that, you know, they kind of hadn't faced before. So we'll talk a little bit about where sort of remote working was pre-pandemic. So before the pandemic, only 4.9% of the workforce actually worked remotely. That's about 8 million people in America. 31% worked from home occasionally, so about 52 million people. But 56% of people had jobs that could be done remotely, so that represents about 94 million folks. At least our perception was they could do their job remotely at the time. And on the other side of it, 80% of employees wanted to work remotely, but only 27% of companies offered remote working. So there was an appetite. Technology had enabled people to work remotely, but there really wasn't much acceptance or embracing of it from the corporate side, nor do I think from the educational side either, a little bit, but still stuck in traditional ways. So then the pandemic came. And in America during the pandemic, 110 million employees had to work from home. That represented a 13x increase. So a massive surge of remote working. And what organizations have found is that productivity has actually increased. And in surveys with workers about why that is, the number one reason is no commute. And so where people were spending half an hour, 40 minutes a day driving to work, and then another half hour, 40 minutes getting home, that extra time was time that people have been willing to donate a small portion of to work. So some people might work an extra 15 minutes just to complete a task. But the fact that they got so much time back without their commute had helped them increase productivity. Then there's the lack of coworker distractions. I know for me, that's been huge. Normally people are in and out of my office like mad, but working at home, I have the odd child visitor, but other than that, I'm pretty much up in my office by myself. And then the last thing is a lot less meetings. A lot of companies had a meeting culture, and while I think people are spending more time on Zoom, the total volume of meetings has gone down. And then on the employee side, 35% of employees say they don't miss the office at all. And you know, there's certainly people who do miss it, but a good chunk don't miss it in the least. So that's kind of where we were during the pandemic. And as we start to emerge from it in certain places in the world, you see that 43% of employees want to continue working from home. They've enjoyed it, and they enjoy the extra time they get back. And digging further, 35% of folks say they'll actually change jobs to work from home if they have to. 30% would take a pay cut to work from home. And 28% of folks say they'll actually go out and start looking for a new job if their company won't extend remote working after the pandemic. And to sort of cater to that, 43% of companies now plan to offer at least some type of work from home. So the change is coming. I think it's long overdue. I think we've had the ability to have a remote workforce for some time, but companies were just reluctant, worried about productivity, and just the hassle of getting everything set up to do so. So I think the change is coming. There are also some tremendous benefits. So for employees, the average employee will save $22,000 a year, employer will save $22,000 a year from increased productivity. As I mentioned, less meetings and people willing to donate a bit of their commute time to work. Lower real estate costs, this is a big one. We have been hearing that, for example, here I'm in Ottawa, Canada, and one of the companies headquartered here is Shopify. They're a pretty big organization, and they've committed to going full-time permanent remote, along with a number of other tech companies. And what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of their massive office buildings and scale down to a small office for critical staff, but the rest of folks will work from home. And so that's a huge cost savings in real estate that they're realizing. And then we've noticed it at our company, there's reduced absenteeism. People are less likely to burn sick days when they're working from home. And I think we can expect lower turnover if we're one of the companies offering remote working, because so many people want to work remotely. And I think if you don't offer it, your turnover is likely to be a little bit higher. So huge cost savings for companies. And on the employee side, there's huge cost savings as well. So the average employee stands to save $6,000 to $8,000 a year in travel, parking, food. But to me, the bigger one, I think most people these days would say that the more important thing is the time saved. And just the commute time alone will save people 22 work days per year of time in their commutes, be it on public transit or in their car. That's a huge thing to get back for employees. So all this whole section of the presentation is to say, remote working and distance working is coming, it's here, and I don't think some companies will go back to business as usual, but a good chunk won't. And I'm curious as to what will happen in the school system as well. And that's to say nothing of the environmental benefits of this, less people driving cars, burning petroleum, all that kind of stuff. There's just too many benefits for us to go back to business as usual as it was before the pandemic. So remote workforces, or even remote learners that, in education, there are some challenges. And the first one is technology and equipment. First of all, people have to have a place in their home that they can be set up to work. And they have to have the right technology. So it's hardware, and then it's access to whatever softwares they need to do their job, phones, all that kind of business. So there's a technological equipment hurdle that people have to overcome, and organizations have to overcome. They need to find ways to ensure productivity. That's been the biggest worry. But I think there's tons of great solutions for that. You've got screen sharing software for meetings. You've got task tracking software for development shops, project management software for services companies. There's so much software that can enable that I don't think that's really an issue as much as it is just a hassle to implement new systems. And those systems will help overcome the challenge of collaboration. So where I think the real challenge lies is in the human side. How do you maintain morale in a remote workforce who aren't getting together? That feeling of being together and being in a crowd can be a real morale booster. For remote workforces, that won't be there. How do you build culture? and make sure that your company values are sort of being exuded to a remote workforce. And then the topic we're going to talk about today, training. How do we train a remote workforce compared to, you know, instructor-led training in the ways we've done it traditionally? So those are some of the challenges of the remote workforce. We're going to focus on the training piece. So I think the big challenge, the challenges that need to be overcome in training your remote staff is, first of all, traditionally static learning experiences. And those have, you know, you see particularly in corporate training, there's a massive aversion to training, largely because the experiences themselves haven't been very interactive. A lot of times it's reading or watching a video. It's passive and not that enjoyable experience for employees. And so what that results in is low participation and even lower repeat engagement. So for companies that are looking, or organizations that are looking to train a remote workforce, they're going to need to overcome employee apathy and sort of bad training experiences if they want to actually have rollout training that's going to have an impact. So what's effective remote training? I think the first thing is it's got to be self-paced. You know, I don't think long training sessions, you know, 2-hour instructor-led or even watch a half-hour video, it's too long for people. We have a short attention span and we like to jump around from thing to thing. So I think self-paced is a very important element, being able to take it when you can. And speaking to the people willing to do a little bit extra with that travel time they're claiming back, I think if you give them self-paced training, they may eat up chunks of their day in between tasks and stuff. If the training's short and quick and engaging, I think being self-paced will really help drive participation. The next piece is distributed practice. I don't know how many of you have watched the Netflix documentary, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. So what strikes you about it, and about so many people who are great at what they do, is Michael Jordan went to the gym and shot baskets over and over and over and over again. Nobody ever gets good at doing something by doing it once. You get good by doing it over and over and over again. And I think that distributed practice is key, but if your learning experiences are static, nobody's going to take them multiple times. And so we got to find ways to do that. I think also delivery within the flow of work. There's a lot of times, you know, when you're not in the office now, you're remote, where you might have been able to turn to an employee and say, hey, how do I do this? That won't be as easy an option. You could Slack them, but they might not be available at that moment. You're not going to set up a video conference just to talk to an employee about one thing you need. So what you need is training that can be delivered within the flow of work that you can access when you need it. And so I think that's another key element. Now, interactive and engaging, I mean, that should always be the case with training, but it hasn't been. And I think for a remote workforce, it's mandatory. At home, the distractions are way more numerous than they are at the office. You got kids, you got pets, you got the fridge, you've got Netflix, all sorts of things distracting people potentially, and that are more fun options than taking training. So I think that really trainers are going to have to ratchet up the engagement and interactive factor if it's going to be successful. Also, remote employees, they're sitting at home on their own. I think we need to make sure that our programs are social, drive a little bit of collaboration, so that there's this, and that helps to build that culture and to build morale. And so I think social and collaborative are key. And the last piece is trackable. I mean, organizations aren't going to fund training programs in any way if they can't actually measure ROI. So I think those are some crucial elements of what training needs to look like for a remote workforce. So looking at the options that we have available at a lot of large companies and organizations, they have learning management systems. And they are an option, but I personally don't think they're a very good one for a bunch of reasons. The first of which is a lot of these systems, the sort of older traditional LMSs, are installed on premises. So that means that the software is actually installed on servers that reside within the office walls. So if you've got a large workforce or a large constituency of learners that have to take this courseware, they actually have to VPN into your office. And to have VPN that supports, hundreds of concurrent sessions is expensive and just isn't going to be tenable for companies. So I think you can just completely rule out the on-premises learning management systems. But then the next piece is their learning experiences are notoriously static. When we go into organizations and talk to their learners about the training, the words we hear are dreadful and awful and stuff like that. And it's largely because, they're PDFs and they're PowerPoints, and they might throw a quiz at the end, but they're really static learning experiences. So I think the other thing about learning management systems is they're built in a very old technological framework called SCORM and Tin Can that really neuters how interactive your training experience can be. So there's some pretty significant limitations imposed by the technology. And what you see from that, because of the static learning experience, is participation is low. So if it's low at the office where a manager can come and say, hey, did you take your training? It's going to be even lower at home. And if participation is low, then repeat engagement is going to be even lower, because the experience, those who do log in don't have a good experience, they're not coming back. And that will just continue to drive employee apathy about the program. So I think most traditional learning management systems are not going to be effective solutions moving forward. So then live video conferencing, that's another option, and one that I think can be part of the mix. Adds a human element, creates connection amongst people. I think it's not a bad way, but it is inherently passive. And the problem with video conferencing is that often people will multitask. And you get on a video conference, you're listening, and you think to yourself, yeah, I can answer a couple of emails, or I can knock off a couple of tasks while I'm listening. But the problem is, once you kind of divide your attention, the task that is in the forefront of your brain, if it's writing an email or whatever, really becomes the one you're focusing on. So your retention and comprehension of the content being delivered through video conferencing is going to go down significantly once you start multitasking. And so that sort of learners being prone to distraction and multitasking tends to make remote training a little less effective. And then additionally, the other challenge is the tracking options are pretty limited. Kind of what you get there is, did people participate? And if you maybe run a couple surveys and stuff, you can validate a little bit of learning, but there's not much else that you get. So when you're going to try to prove ROI on your training program and prove that either people learned or that it affected their real world behavior and they actually changed as a result of it, it's very tricky to get any data that backs that up. So the next thing a lot of companies will look at, and organizations will look at, is sort of online courses that you buy from third-party vendors. Not a bad solution, could be part of the mix as well. But again, passive, mostly videos, PowerPoints, PDFs, that kind of stuff. They don't drive any repetition, so that distributed practice, repeating the motion over and over and over again, they're not going to drive that type of engagement. And so consequently, you'll see low retention rates, because they're kind of the courses that you kind of take, it's one and done. You finish it and you're done, that's it. So when you only do something once, the retention rates are going to be low. Again, you kind of get limited tracking with those programs. It's kind of, did they come, did they participate, did they pass or fail, if there's a quiz element to it. And then the last piece is they're expensive, because for each employee, you got to buy each course. So it becomes a very expensive way to train when you're buying third-party courseware. So those are kind of your immediate options available for distance learning. And this is where I think game-based learning really comes in and can really shine. The first thing about game-based learning, if it's done properly, your participation rates will be extremely high, much higher than they will be for any of the other options. And it's because positioning your training as a game will make it more attractive and will increase people's likelihood of coming in just to check it out. There's curiosity level, and for some people it's about being competitive, and other people it's about playing games, but there's a lot of different reasons, which is what you need to drive to attract a remote workforce. You got to give a whole lot of reasons for people to participate. So once they get there, the game-based experience is active. Unlike watching a video, reading a PDF, checking out a PowerPoint, whatever, you're not sitting back and absorbing, but rather you're being challenged to provide information, and then you're being given feedback. And I think that active learning experience is more engaging for the learner, more effective at training on the content, and will definitely drive a sort of longer participation than any other type of training. The next thing is game-based learning is inherently micro-learning. I mean, when we talk about game-based learning, we're not talking about, you know, a 5-hour first-person shooter game. We're talking about a short, casual game that has whose content is really learning content that's designed to be consumed quickly and provide feedback quickly. And it's that micro-learning that I think is the way people want to learn now. And if it's done right, when people don't do well, it will prompt them to play again, which drives that high repetition, distributed practice that is crucial to people really onboarding the information and skills that they're learning in the training. So ultimately, I think a game-based approach is going to drive more participation. It's going to create active learning that drives repeated reps, people coming back and taking it more, which leads to better learning outcomes that are being driven faster. And then on the business side of it, organizations will be able to look and say, the investment that I made in my training, I can see that that learning occurred and that change is happening in the workforce. And so that ROI validates the investment that was being made, which I think is going to be crucial with budgets being tight in the post-pandemic world. So I think game-based learning is really, really poised to succeed there. But I want to make the distinction between gamification and game-based learning because they are very different things. And gamification, we call it around the office, we call it lamification. It's rightfully earned a bit of a bad name in the corporate training world because there are a lot of bad examples of how it's being used. So the definition, gamification, is really where you're adding game elements to some type of task in order to drive participation. Conversely, with a game-based approach, it's actually morphing the experience into a game so that people learn through play. So that's a key difference. And I want to illustrate it. I've sort of pulled up some screenshots to kind of explain the difference. So here's an example of a learning system. We have our friend Sarah Smith here, and you can see there's a progress meter that shows how far along she is in her training, and then how far along she is in each of the different courses that she's taking. And for completion of these, she earns badges and points. And so, you know, these are game elements that have been tacked onto a system to motivate Sarah to participate. But then we go and look at the learning experience, and it's all content that you got to read. And so those points and badges, you know, once you finish reading 10 or 15 PDFs, who cares about your points and badges? Who cares how many badges you have and how many points you have if they have no context outside of the learning system? And because the learning experience is still the same old experience, the effect of adding game elements will be short-lived. You know, it might motivate people to read 1 or 2 extra PDFs, but it's certainly not going to drive continued participation and repeat learning because the learning experience didn't change. Another example of a gamified approach is ones where you can watch a video or read a report or whatever. And when you've completed, instead of earning badges and points, what you earn is the ability to play casual games that aren't educational games. They're just casual games that are sort of the carrot or the reward for having taken training. A lot of flaws in this model. first of all, there's a million game sites out there, so why would I bother enduring some crappy training experience just so that I can play Candy Crush? You know, I can go directly to MSN or allgames.com to play Candy Crush. So I think that's one issue. But I think also there's the issue that, do we really want people playing casual games that have nothing to do with their job as part of training? I think organizations will find that's kind of wasteful. And so I don't think that model makes sense, but it's all predicated on the fact that the learning experience still hasn't changed. So those are a couple of examples of sort of gamification approaches. I'm going to swap my screen now. And what I want to do is share the Lemonade learning experience with you, not as a means of advertising our product. What I want to do is explain how a game-based platform can work and how its specific tactics tie to driving the engagement and repeat engagement that you need to drive learning outcomes with a remote workforce. So I'm just going to switch over here to Lemonade. Okay, so this is the Lemonade learning environment. It is built in the image of today's most addictive mobile and social games. So you can see here that I am at level 6 and that I have 20,000 clients and I'm earning cash. This whole system is configurable. You can change the graphics, you can change all the copy, all the theme, whatever you want. But the reason I say that is because I'm going to go over to the authoring to show you how the game works. So in the beginning, this is where you'd author the booster game. I start with a tiny little bank in a rural town, and my goal is to grow it into a gleaming downtown tower. And the way that I do that, I'm going back to the live environment now. The way that I do that is by excelling in training courses that earn me clients. And the more clients I have, obviously, the more money my business earns while I'm not doing anything. And that cash that I earn, I can then go and buy upgrades. Now, I recall that we had someone who was interested in financial training, training or game-based learning for financial, I think it was Elaine. So this is an example because this particular version was configured for banks. So here you can see I can go and upgrade my branch, my phone channel, my ATM, my headquarters, mobile app. So we'll go and take a look at mobile apps. So here you can see I've already purchased fraud alerts and monthly spending trackers and so on, but I'll go down and see, okay, I haven't purchased mobile check deposit. So I could spend this many points and it would earn me additional cash per second. And some of these will actually earn me more customers. So these upgrades that I buy help me upgrade my bank and move along a little bit faster in the game. But the real goal of the booster game, which we call it, is to keep people coming back every day to participate. And the reason that they do is, you can send them an email each day and say, here's your cash balance. And that makes, or say to people, come back and check out how much cash you've earned. And if the training's not every day, but it's every week, it's still the same model works. We find people are curious to come back and see how much they've accumulated so that they can go and upgrade their bank. But the reality is the fastest way to upgrade it is to take training. So this booster game, really, its main goal is keep people coming back every day to click that button. And once they click that button, they're into all of the courseware that they can participate in. And this is all authorable in the system, so our clients can author all their own stuff. But I just want to show you how the learning ties to the booster game. So the booster game keeps people coming back daily, but it also drives that repetition that I've mentioned is so crucial to educating people, especially when you've got distance learners who might be distracted by other things. So I'm going to play a very simple game because it's fast and I can show you how it impacts. So here's a simple game that's just a true or false game. And I'll just answer a couple quick questions. So customers can deposit from any institution around the world. I'm going to say that's true. And it says, no, customers can only deposit from a Canadian institution. Okay, so I got that one wrong. So I click continue, and now it says customers need to be over 18 to use it. So I'm going to say true again. And turns out there's no minimum age requirement to use mobile remote check deposit. So when I click continue, what you're going to see is I got a 0 score, but I lost 8 customers in that booster game. Nobody likes to lose stuff. One key gamification element is people would rather, it's more important to people to not lose than it is to gain. So what's that going to do? It's going to motivate me to click that button, try again. And if I try again, now of course I've only used an example with only 2 questions, but if there were 20 questions, I can try again over and over and over till I master it and maximize the number of clients I earn in the booster game. And what we find is that a good chunk of people are going to do that. And that drives the repetition and the distributed practice required for people to actually learn. So I'm just going to go out of this one, show a couple more examples to give you a sense of how these things can all tie together. Let's talk about long form content. I beat up an awful lot on PDFs and long form content. So I got to back up that criticism with something. So here's how you would take that content and make it a game so that it's engaging for a remote learner. So rather than have them read a paragraph of content, here's a paragraph into which we've nested 4 mistakes, and I got 5 lives to try to find them. So now I got to read it, and I actually have to pay attention and understand it. I can't just tick a box and say I read it. I actually have to think. So it says mobile deposit is an easy way for our clients to check their account balance on the go. Clients can access the service. So obviously it's not check their account balance on the go. So I go and say send money to friends, ignore, deposit their checks. So then it says clients can access the service by ATM. Well, it's mobile check deposit, so it's got to be their mobile phone. So mobile app. To use the mobile deposit, client must have a checking account with the bank and either be a personal or small business. Well, man, I wonder if they could have a savings account. Let's see. So I got that one wrong. I lost a life. New clients are eligible to start after 14 business days. It's probably immediately. And the limit is 500. It decreases to 15. There's no fee associated. Project. So I think I'm going to say 1,500. So I'll say it increases to 1,000. So there, I finished the module. And you see, I actually had to read it and think about it. So that's the kind of engagement that I think we're going to need to roll out for distance learners if we want them to read long form content and actually pay attention to it. You can see I got an 80% grade and I got 25 new clients and earned some bonus clients, but I know that I can go back and play that again and get it perfect. So I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to repeat that information again to get 100% and maximize the number of clients I earned in the booster game. So I'll just show you a couple more examples so you can get an idea of other ways you can gamify or make a game out of specific types of learning content. So a lot of companies that have technology that they either need to train customers on or their employees on, and with the remote workforce, it's tricky. In a lot of cases, you bring all folks into a boardroom or a classroom and teach them how to use the software. You won't have that luxury training a remote workforce. So, and getting people to go and learn a software on their own might be tricky. So you can morph that into a game as well to make it more engaging. So here is a mobile app, and I have to figure out how to deposit my check into the mobile app. And as I go through and go enter my amount, oh, you see I got it wrong, and I lost a heart there because I needed to select my account first. So again, it's through making mistakes that I'm going to learn, and it's morphed learning this particular piece of software into a game, making it more fun for people to engage and issuing a challenge, and also inducing mistakes, and it's mistakes that teach us. Ralph Nader has a great quote. It says, your greatest teacher is your last mistake. I think it's great advice. So there's a way that you can morph technology training into a game as well to make it more engaging, to drive that engagement that you need with a remote workforce. So just a couple more things to talk about with regard to the remote workforce and using a game-based approach. So you see this one here that says attend a monthly meeting. So a monthly meeting could be an instructor-led course. It could be anything delivered by a screen share. But what you can do is you can say, attend this meeting or attend this course. And when you attend the course, at the end of the course, the instructor gives a code. And then you can enter the code into Lemonade and you earn cash in the booster game for having done it. So the booster game can start to create a blended learning approach by tying in non-system related training into the system so that it all ties into one game-based experience. The same thing.
John?
Yeah.
A question came up in the chat. What tool did you use to make that game?
Oh, I'm happy to show you. Okay. Lemonade has all its own authoring tools baked in. So I'll go show you. So here, remember I showed you in the beginning that you could change the booster game graphics and all that stuff? Well, you also author all of the steps, any type of course that you want, you author, or step that you want, you author in Lemonade. It has all its own tools built in. So I'll just give you a quick walkthrough. Demo is authoring a technology simulator. A human step is a mentoring step, and it'll say, John, contact Roberta to do a mobile remote check deposit together. So then I contact Roberta, she shows me how to do it. And then when I'm done, she gives me a code to enter into the system that says, I actually took the mentoring from Roberta. So it kind of creates a blended approach within a game-based environment. You can link out, curate content from the web and link out to it. You can build multiple choice game. The polygraph game is that paragraph game, the long form content I showed you. Scenario is a role play scenario where you've got a virtual customer who comes in, you can author that. You can upload SCORM content that was from learning management system. You can build a sorting game that basically you have to categorize things. A streak game is a quiz game where you have to get the longest streak of correct answers that you can. And true or false, I showed you an example. And then you can upload videos or you can curate them from YouTube. And what's cool about it is Lemonade listens. And so if you fast forward the video, you lose customers in the booster game. So it's got its eye on you. But to show you how to author, it's really quite simple. So you'd go in, I'm just gonna enter some gibberish so you don't have to endure my terrible typing. So I'll enter a little description. I'm gonna say this should only take 5 minutes to complete the step and they're gonna learn some stuff. So I click continue and then I save it and that, whoops, somehow I've actually used that name before. How ridiculous is that? Here we go. Okay, I've used that one too. Oh boy, sorry guys. Here we go. I guess I always click the same things when I demo. Okay, so now I'm in there and I can launch my demo editor. So assuming that I've already uploaded the screenshots of the technology I want to create a training thing on, I just launch my asset manager and let's say it's that mobile app I want to do. I would search for my graphic. And once I've found it, I'll go and grab it. And here it is. So now I know I want people to enter a username. So I drag and drop over it. Boom, it launches an editor and I put in enter your username. So that will be the guiding text once people get the little part that's in a bubble. And then the auto text is John. When I click on that, it'll enter John. Then I do the same thing for password, drag and drop, enter password is going to be the guiding text that the learner sees. If I could type, it would be right. And then password is whatever gibberish. And then the last thing is I want them to tap login. So I'll create a hotspot there and say tap here to continue. And then I would click save, or let's say, I wanted to go have another screen. So then I click plus, go to my asset manager, grab my next screen, and the next screen is here. And then I'd enter all my hotspots for that. So this, yeah. When we first started, we had companies asking us to build these from the ground up in the earlier years, and it used to take 2 to 3 weeks to build one. Now you can build one in 10 minutes. So
You've had
super
some great
fast.
compliments in the chat about the work that you've put into this, that it's very well implemented. And we have Ariel shared a link in the chat so people can find it. And Robin Bagnet is asking, she can't find the admin or the development area in Lemonade.
Oh, it's because you have to have a license to the software. It's so people, to access the admin panels, you have to have a license. But if anybody wants to be able to play around in the system, I'll put my email up at the end, and I can give you access to our sandbox.
That would be great. I'm sure that would be very well appreciated. I think I'm
Yeah.
putting my name in there at the end.
Sure thing. Sure thing. So, okay. So that's how you'd author, that's how you'd author a technology simulator. But I'll show you one more just for fun. So for example, let's say, let me just go back to my step list here. Let's say you wanted to author, well, let's say a quiz game. Okay, so I'd go in and I'd give a title to my quiz game. And I would say it's going to be minor work because this one's going to be a little longer. Let's say it's going to take 6 minutes. I enter my description, what players will learn from the step, and then I click next. So then it says, how many questions do you want in a round? So I'll say 8. Go add my first question. So why are we here, let's say. And then when they get it right, I can just say, that's right, or good for you, or whatever. And give a bit more information. That's a teachable moment right there to add some feedback. Then I just go and add my answers. So this one is going to be whatever, I'll enter something and I'll make that one the right answer. So you'd get this feedback. Then the next ones are the wrong answers, and wrong answers are excellent opportunities for teaching. So I'd always recommend putting feedback here and saying, you didn't get it right, but consider these things. So I can add whatever answers I want. And then when I'm done, I click add question, add my next question, write them all in, click publish, your game's built automatically.
One other question came up. Can the games be played through the internet, or are they are they publicly
This is a cloud-based solution, so it can be played anywhere you've got a connection. You can log in just the way you'd log into your Google account or whatever. So in fact, you can log in with Google. And so then you log in and you can participate in training. So what happens is, we work a lot with financial institutions, and so they buy an instance of Lemonade, and then they set up their entire workforce in here, and then you can build courseware for specific departments. So let's say you only want this training for call center staff and this training for frontline staff. Or if it were in a university context, you would have different training for different classes. That's all Lemonade has. It's a learning experience platform, so it's got full learning management system capability. But unlike LMS's, it has its own authoring tools baked in, and it morphs everything into an interactive game.
And does your company also do training besides financial authoring?
Yeah, absolutely. I just happened to show this version because a lot of what we do is in the financial space, but we're also working with some insurance companies. We are working with a telco. We use it internally for sales training and marketing training. We have a company in the UK using it for compliance training. So it's content agnostic, because you can, as I mentioned, even if you go to, this booster game, if you don't want it to be a bank, you can change that into a retail store and change the background here and change all these boosters. And it's as simple as, you have to build a graphic, but once you built it, you grab it off your hard drive and put it in here. And then when you want to go and change the boosters themselves, it's as simple as going in, I want to change the name, just change it, So everything is configurable. And the rapid authoring tools are, not to be boastful, but there's no authoring faster than this. it's really
It does look really impressive. And again, it's since you're doing full screen, you don't see the great comments going through the chat. I will save it and make sure that you get that. But so Elaine was saying that Lemonade LXP, I guess is its full name, takes
Lemonade
an
LXP.
awesome approach to financial microlearning and gets workers and customers in digital channels buy-in. And then somebody else was asking, are the games 508 compliant? And then the other part of that is your cloud SAS FedRAMP?
Is my cloud, I'm sorry,
SAS FedRAMP? I'm not sure what that was referring to.
These are questions that my CTO would need to answer, but to give you context, this is all WCAG AA compliant. It's GDPR compliant. Companies that are using us, TD Bank, IS Bank out of Turkey, National Bank of Australia, US Bank.
What about healthcare? Any use in healthcare, people are asking?
We have had some interest so far from healthcare, but have yet to land a client. That's actually a target industry for us next. We really want to work in that industry because we think our tools are really well designed for it. There's one last thing I'd like to show you, and I apologize that I'm sort of showing off the product so much, but because somebody talked about customer engagement, I want to explain one thing because I think customers are inherently distance learners as well. And so bear with me for 1 sec. I didn't expect to show this, but if you recall within the online course, I showed that you can create a simulator, and we actually built one, or I showed you how to build one, where you can walk through a piece of technology. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong one. I apologize. Let me just go back here. How to complete a mobile deposit. So this technology walkthrough that I showed you, you can automatically generate a public-facing, WCAG compliant, searchable, branded site to house all these things for 2 reasons. For your frontline staff, so when customers call into your contact centers not understanding how to use your tech, they can go to this, which is generated by Lemonade, which I can then say, so when people don't know how to enroll in online banking, no problem. I click on the link and I walk them through. And if I can say to them, what step are you stuck on? And I'll go find the exact step that they're having a problem with. And then I can actually email them a direct link from here so that we're on the same page, so I can get you through that challenging thing much faster and improve the customer experience. And so I showed you how to author the simulator in here. To create the digital academy, here's how you do it. You go in, you set your page title, and you go in your links and logos and stuff. Pick your colors right here and whatever. Then you just go into your content, and this is, you first of all put your copy in for your main page, but then all the demos you authored for your training to train your staff, they're all available to you here, and you can put them in your featured section or mobile banking or whatever. Once you've selected the ones you want, you click publish, and it generates that in seconds. So you've got a public-facing support site that helps your customers self-help and helps your frontline staff with customer questions when they call in or come into your retail operation or your branch or whatever it is. So Lemonade's a full 360. It's actually a learning experience platform and a digital adoption platform baked into one. And you don't just have to, it doesn't have to be just mobile apps. You can simulate, any software you're using in your organization. So if you needed to train staff on how to use your CRM or how to use Gmail or whatever, you can author walkthroughs of that as well.
Sounds good. We just have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to maybe leave opportunities for 1 or 2 questions, but there was a question that went through the chat. Does it integrate within a school? I'm not sure if that's how, can you run it inside a standard school-based LMS? Or?
It's very, so from an LMS standpoint, what we can do is you can use what we call Lemonade Lite, which allows you to use just the authoring tools, but you don't have the booster game where you're leveling up your bank and stuff, but you can author content, and then your LMS links out to the content, and then the content sends scores back to your LMS. So it doesn't live within the LMS. And the reason that is LMS, as I mentioned earlier, are built in SCORM. And SCORM is a very old technology that neuters the experience. You can't have the type of movements and animations and stuff we have in Lemonade. So you can use Lemonade Lite to author game-based training, but you won't get the booster game and all that stuff.
Sounds great.
So if I'm happy to, got another 5 minutes or so for questions, but I just wanted to highlight what the best practices are. Because, you know, I gave you a product tour, but really what I was hoping to do today was to share with you the tactics that we're seeing working, so that, you know, if you're building this stuff yourself or trying to figure out how to roll this stuff out, you've got some takeaways to use. So I think the first thing is, it's got to be cloud-based to reach either remote learners or remote customers. Anybody who you're trying to engage, it's got to be in the cloud, because it's got to be fast, it's got to be auto-scalable, and you can't have to VPN through. So that's the first one. The next one is the importance of that central narrative game. Now, it doesn't have to be a game. In Lemonade, we have the game where you're leveling up your bank, or it could be your business. And like, we have a version that's a lemonade stand. You start with a tiny stand, and by the end you grow it into a big, huge retail operation. So you can, that narrative game could be, what it really is it gives context to the points and the performance of the game-based learning. So you could replace the narrative game with an employee rewards program and say, the better you do in training, the more points you earn that you can redeem for hats and toasters or whatever. The key is that there has to be context to the game-based learning modules, because if I just earn points but they don't mean anything, then, you know, they're not going to, their effect won't last. So we've used a narrative game for Lemonade, but you could use employee rewards. You could use a contest. There's lots of different ways that you can create that contextual piece to the game-based approach. Then the next one, the content has to be the game. You can't use the same old content. You can't have PDFs and videos and expect people, by tacking leaderboards and badges onto them, that people are going to think it's great. They're not. It's not going to stick. And then the last piece is blended. If you can use it to bring in that the video conferencing, to bring in mentoring, to bring in online course use, and tie it in using either the central narrative game like Lemonade or an employee rewards, then everything becomes part of the game, your entire learning experience. And I think that's how you're going to succeed. So to me, those are the key elements of an effective game-based learning approach for distance learners. I just want to throw my contact info up there in case anybody has any questions or would like to play around in Lemonade or whatever. So thanks a ton. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for
that is great. Thank you. I would like to open up, and John, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And I did save the chat so that you can get some of those comments that were shared. Bravo, thank you, all kinds of good stuff. So is there someone who has a question or two that we can open up? You can unmute yourself. We can kind of take a question or put it into the chat if you're shy. Okay, well, I'm just going to take 1 second and share the conference session evaluation screen.
Hi, I do have a question if you're willing.
Yes, please.
Yeah, of course.
Sure, this is Mari Strand-Carey at the University of Oregon. And, you know, we do a lot of grant-funded work, and we're always looking for ways to do that more efficiently because we don't have a lot of expertise in-house for everything we dream up. Do you do partnering with nonprofits or with grants and things like that, and or do you offer discounts for nonprofits?
Yep, absolutely. We're for us, especially if we can see Lemonade getting used in other ways that from what it's being used already, there's a great interest for us, because for us, if we could get a use case out of it and a case study that sort of validates its effectiveness in a new way it's being used, we're super interested. And we're also interested in helping organizations who need help. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Give you an example. We got contacted by a school board in New York that is for schools in impoverished areas, and we really like to help them. And so, yeah, we're definitely up for that sort of stuff. So hit me up, absolutely.
Awesome. Before you talked about Lemonade, I was envisioning all the ways I would love to build all this. And then as soon as you said it was already built and we just had to put the content in, I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, hit me up. I'd be absolutely happy to chat with you about it.
Thank you. Anybody else with one last question? Okay, we'll end the session with a comment from Alyssa. The discussion has opened my eyes to remote training challenges, best practices, and your efficient authoring product. Thanks, John. And I second that. So thank you all very much, and see you at the next session. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, gang. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.